RPN Provincial Stations. DZBS Baguio, DYKB Bacolod, DXXX Zamboanga, DXKO Cagayan de Oro, DXDX General Santos, DYKC Cebu, DZKI-IRIGA, DXKD Dipolo, DXKS Surigao, DXKP Pagadian, DXKT Davao, at DZRL Bata. RPN Provincial Stations.
RPN Radio Philippines Network, Radyo Ronda, DZKI-IRIGA, member kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
CNN Philippines R sa RPN-DZKI-IRIGA alas 6 hasta alas 7 ng manggi, Lunes hanggang Biyernes. CNN Philippines R.
Which resulted in some inconvenience.
Humingi tayo ng paumanhin. Admittedly, nagkaroon ng konting inconvenience to, pero sana maunawaan po nila.
There were also canine dogs sweeping bus terminals to detect different types of illegal drugs. Meanwhile, PITX management recorded an average of 91,000 returning passengers this past 6 days. This weekend, the terminal expects this to go over 100,000 passengers, even from Holy Monday to Wednesday. With the terminal having 2,000 to 2,500 bus units, passengers can book trips via online or in ticketing booths. While buses are not yet fully booked, plans to even augment the number of bus units are in place in case the need for it arises next week. Following minimum health protocols like social distancing and wearing a face mask remain a must for everyone. Stanley Gaete, CNN Philippines.
From bus terminals to the country's main gateway, passengers are also filling the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, many of them traveling for the first time in 2 years. More from Tristan Odalo.
Airport officials are beefing up security measures ahead of the expected influx of travelers during the Holy Week and summer vacation season. And while restrictions have been eased in many parts of the country, officials remind the public that we are still in the middle of a pandemic situation.
Despite the gloomy, rainy weather and waiting in the queue for hours at NAIA Terminal 3, some families and travelers express excitement over their travel plans pushing through, like Misty and 9 of her family members who are bound for Boracay on Friday. She says this is her first travel with family, including kids, since the pandemic happened.
Para po may peace of mind. Mama ko, ate ko, husband ko, anak ko, mga pamangkin ko. Super excited.
Angel Timosa couldn't wait to be reunited with his son and grandchildren in Iloilo. He and his wife are taking the opportunity to travel back to their home province ahead of the influx of passengers come Holy Week.
Excited kami na makita yung apo, gano'n. Kasi siyempre sa tagal ba naman na may parang hindi sapat yung sa kung na kayo nag-uusap sa cellphone Iba talaga yung makaka-uwi at nakikita mo sila ng personal
Cagayan de Oro-bound passenger Rodolfo Pancrudo also returns to Mindanao after being stranded by the community lockdown for 2 years. He hopes things will be returning to normal soon.
Mag-Holy Week kami sa Mindanao. Alam na, matagal na kaming hindi nakapunta doon. Walang problema ang biyahe kasi maganda naman ang biyahe ngayon dahil maski sa traffic. Galing kaming Quezon.
Travel documents are being thoroughly checked at the entrance. Passengers are also reminded to comply with the minimum health standards. Screening, surveillance, and communication equipment have been checked ahead of the influx of passengers starting this Palm Sunday.
For the entire months of April and May, airport officials will conduct extensive security screening and passenger assistance operations under the Oplan Biyaheng Ayos. Officials also remind the public to check in their flight details with their airlines before going to the airport. Tristan Odalo, CNN Philippines.
And to those heading out, we remind you to take extra caution on the road. You can still expect cloudy skies with scattered rain showers because of a low-pressure area. Pag-asa says this will be in the Visayas, Caraga, Northern Mindanao, Zamboanga Peninsula, Mimaropa, Bicol, and Quezon Province. Cloudy skies with rains and isolated light rains are forecast over the northern parts of Luzon. The areas are on your screens. Metro Manila and the rest of the country will have partly cloudy to cloudy skies with isolated rain showers. Pag-asa warns of the possible entry of tropical storm Malakas into the country. It was last spotted over 2,200 kilometers east of Mindanao. COVID-19 transmission has plateaued in the country. Health spokesperson Maria Rosario Vergara explains infections are the lowest given the current situation. An average of 357 cases were reported daily from March 31st to April 6th. But Vergara and infectious diseases specialist Edsel Salvania says the numbers could still go up or down.
Ang key dyan, kailangan masustain na natin ang plateauing o pagbaba pa o mapababa pa natin from that level through our minimum public health standards at pagbabakuna. So it's either bad or good. Kaya lang, kailangan ang gusto natin masustain na yung good side, patuloy na pagbaba nito mga kaso.
Yung interventions is keeping the number of cases at a constant rate. So how do we improve that? We improve that by improving boosting, by improving adherence kung kakayanin pa. How will that get worse? If people start to relax, don't get boosted, mag-wane yung immunity at hindi gumamit ng mask.
The DOH also wants boosters for minors 12 to 17 years old. It has asked the Food and Drug Administration to amend the emergency use authority of the vaccines to include that age group. The department also awaiting FDA approval for the fourth COVID-19 shot for adults.
So yung fourth dose at saka yung booster shots for kids o yung 12 to 17. Atin lang pong inaantay ang Food and Drug Administration na maglabas ng amended EUA. Pag lumabas po ito, isusumitin naman natin ito sa Health Technology Assessment Council para sa kanilang pagsusuri ukol dito sa mga sektor na ito. Once all of these processes are done, we can be able to issue out the guidelines.
The DOH plans to hold supplemental vaccinations of infants every last Thursday or Friday from April to June. It aims to inoculate 80% of 1.4 million infants 0 to 12 months old. Business Process Outsourcing, or BPO companies, and registered business enterprises, or RBEs, may extend their work-from-home setup. The Philippine Economic Zone Authority, or PEZA, says it is accepting applications for the hybrid work arrangement, where 70% of the company's employees work on-site and the remaining 30% work from home. PEZA says this arrangement is possible only until September 12th, when the extended state of calamity because of the COVID-19 pandemic is set to end. The Economic Zone regulator earlier required BPO firms to return to office by April 1st, an order which Finance Assistant Secretary Paula Alvarez said forced some companies to withdraw from PEZA. PEZA, however, says it is not true that registered firms have left the eco-zones. Up next, an update on detained Senator Laila de Lima, who granted an exclusive interview with CNN Philippines. And the Philippines and the U.S. conclude their biggest ever Balikatan exercises on the same day of President Duterte's virtual meeting with Chinese President or counterpart Xi Jinping. Welcome back to Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. Vice presidential candidate Lito Atienza apologizes to presidential Bet Ping Lacson for urging him to back out of the race. Atienza had suggested that both of them withdraw so Lacson's running mate, Senate President Tito Soto, can form a tandem with Senator Manny Pacquiao. Lacson has accepted the apology.
Hindi expected yung reaction ni Ping. He rejected the idea outright. He in fact considered it an insult. And I apologize publicly, sabi ko, hindi naman insulto yun. I did not mean to insult Ping. Huwag naman ikagalit ni Ping. Pero siya nakikita kong kailangan gumalaw. Still, a lot of time to think about it, pray about it, talk to people about it. Kung nananaisin niya na makatulong ng malaki pag naligtas ng ating bansa, magagawa ni Ping yan.
Vice President Leni Robredo attended an education forum in Pangasinan. She told the media on the sidelines of the event that lessons from the country's history should be included in the school curriculum.
The Marcos era. Pero marami pang ibang mga leksyon na dapat hindi na maulit. Na pag sinisiguro natin na ituturo ito sa mga kabataan, yung lahat na korupsyon na nangyari and how people reacted to corruption, at dapat kabahagi ito para pati sa public officials, nawawarn sila na parating may sukdulan yung lahat na pinagagagawa.
Bongbong Marcos campaigned in eastern Visayas, where he saw an 8% drop in voter preference based on the latest Pulse-Asia survey. He first visited Catarman City, northern Samar. Police say up to 7,000 supporters welcomed him there. There was no mayor present during the event since all 24 local chief executives in the province backed Robredo. Marcos was also in northern Samar, where he reiterated his call for unity, his vow to continue President Duterte's Build, Build, Build program, and his plan to lower electricity rates. The former senator will campaign in Biliran province next. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno, who visited Zamboanga City, vowed there will be no war in the region if he wins the presidency.
It's a bold commitment. It's hard to fulfill, but we must seek for peace. Peace creates prosperity. Peace creates panatag ang pamumuhay. Kristiyano, Muslim, pwedeng magkasama, pwedeng mamuhay ng mapayapa.
Labor leader Leody de Guzman joined a protest calling on the Calabarzon Wage Board to raise the minimum wage from 400 to 750 pesos. De Guzman vowed to abolish provincial rates and push for a 750 peso minimum wage nationwide if he becomes president. Now, how does re-electionist Senator Laila de Lima campaign from behind bars? Amor Santos joins us live as she tells us about her up-close conversation with De Lima at the PNP Custodial Center in Camp Crame. Amor, as we know, De Lima has been in jail for more than 5 years because of on drug charges, which she says were politically motivated. What does she say about her limited chance to win votes?
Yes, Senator Laila de Lima called it a very, very uphill battle, but she's not losing hope. In the latest Pulse-Asia survey, she ranked 21st to 28th, a far cry from the surveys leading to the 2016 polls, where she was consistent at the top 12. On February 28th, the court allowed De Lima to hold in-person meetings with her campaign team. It's the same court order that allowed her face-to-face media interviews, but without recording devices. In the remaining month before the election, she says her team will intensify the campaign, including house-to-house visits, although they are still trying to raise funds for TV advertisements. If given a chance to personally talk to voters, she wants to tell them about how she has fought and worked despite what she calls baseless charges against her. If elected to a second term, the senator says she will refile bills promoting justice and human rights. She says her hands are tied in detention as she fails to participate in committee hearings or plenary debates. She says she was expecting her colleagues in the majority to pass a resolution seeking her virtual participation in Senate hearings. But she said, quote, hindi nila ako sinuportahan, unquote. De Lima was arrested in February 2017, just 8 months into her term. Pia?
Yes, Amor, it's a rare media interview. The first time the court allowed the detained senator to take questions from the press. Can you tell us more about security and health protocols?
Well, Pia, we weren't allowed to bring in cameras or recording devices. And before entering the PNP Custodial Center, we were asked to present negative antigen tests and also proof of vaccination. It was a 1-hour interview in a separate air-conditioned room where she also meets with her staff and campaign team. Present during the interview was Fiscal Quincy Carandang. He made sure we won't discuss the merits of De Lima's pending cases. Pia.
Amor, De Lima had a medical checkup this week. How is her health, and what did the center say about the last 5 years in detention?
Well, Senator De Lima says at 62 years old, she's not in perfect health, but nothing serious or alarming in her medical tests. For her, her detention is both a blessing and a curse. She says she's now closer to God and appreciates the things she previously took for granted, such as time with family, and in her own words, she says she has, quote, mellowed. Pia.
So, Amor, from Justice Secretary and Commission on Human Rights Chairperson, she's now facing drug charges. What is the status of these cases, and how does she expect them to proceed in the next administration?
Well, as we know, Pia, the court has dismissed 1 of 3 drug cases against De Lima. Her camp is set to present evidence for 1 case, while the court is still hearing her bail plea in another case. De Lima has high hopes she will be vindicated if Vice President Leni Robredo wins as president, saying it will create an environment of truth-telling. She admits she's, quote, extremely worried about a Bongbong Marcos presidency, saying it will be a regression to human rights abuses and corruption and will be bad for the economy. But she said she's not sure how interested the survey frontrunner is in her case.
Amor, De Lima, a staunch critic of President Duterte, and she even filed a communication with the International Criminal Court. What did she say about the suspension of the ICC probe?
Well, Pia, Senator Laila De Lima is disappointed with the suspension, but she believes the ICC has gathered enough information and that it will eventually issue a warrant of arrest against the chief executive. We also asked her if she has any message for President Duterte. She thought about it for a few seconds and said, "There will be a day of reckoning, Mr. President." Pia.
Amor Santos there reporting and filling us in on details on CNN Philippines' exclusive interview with detained Senator Laila De Lima. President Duterte and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping meeting virtually today. Details about what's being discussed by both leaders still not known. Public policy professor Eduardo Araral earlier told CNN Philippines that this may be an act of courtesy with only less than 3 months before Mr. Duterte's term ends. But the talks are happening in light of the recent Scarborough Shoal incident, the Ukraine-Russia war, and China's donation to President Duterte's Build, Build, Build program. Tristan Nadal returns to tell us how Manila's relations with Beijing progressed over the past 6 years.
From infrastructure, COVID-19 response, and trade relations to strategic cooperation and partnerships, ties between the Philippines and China underwent a tremendous transformation over the past 6 years, but not without controversy. On Tuesday, April 5th, President Duterte expressed his gratitude for the China-funded Binondo Intramuros Bridge. The project, worth over 3 billion pesos, is the 16th government-to-government project between Manila and Beijing under the Duterte administration. In 2021, China was the country's largest trading partner and the second biggest source of foreign investments.
The two presidents have established warm relationship in the past 6 years. We expect this kind of warm relationship to be continued.
As the world grapples with the COVID-19 pandemic, China says it has provided the Philippines with over 57 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines with around 4 million shots donated. But the South China Sea dispute continues to test the relationship between the two nations. Duterte has repeatedly said that Manila cannot afford to go to war with Beijing, but he maintains no country should undermine the 2016 arbitral ruling, something China refuses to recognize. Just recently, the Philippines filed a diplomatic protest against China over a close-distance maneuvering by a Chinese Coast Guard vessel in the disputed Scarborough Shoal.
We have maintained very close diplomatic communication over differences. We have agreed to handle differences in a proper manner.
Ambassador Wang, the Philippines and China, we do not have any quarrel. And we can talk about the Spratly Islands and probably the fishing rights of my countrymen. Plain talk, nothing else.
The Foreign Affairs Department also summoned the Chinese ambassador last month after a Chinese Navy ship entered Philippine waters without permission. But China says these issues are not the sum total of its ties with the Philippines. Both sides have also affirmed their commitment to finish the Code of Conduct for the South China Sea. As Duterte meets with Chinese leader Xi Jinping barely 3 months before his term ends, the question now is how the country's next set of leaders will shape the course of Philippine-China relations. Tristan Udalo, CNN Philippines.
On to Philippine-U.S. relations. The two countries marked the end of their biggest joint military exercises yet, held amid a backdrop of conflict among other nations, as well as increasing tensions in our region. David Santos walks us through the closing ceremony of the 37th Balikatan.
The U.S. Army deploying a Patriot missile battery in Cagayan as part of the amphibious insertion exercise of this year's Balikatan. While the same system is now in Poland to help deter U.S. aggression, it's the first time ever U.S. sent out overseas one of its most sophisticated air defense systems by sea.
This had nothing to do with current events. We were working on doctrine, capabilities, and capacity that our joint force needs currently and then going forward in a way to deter aggression.
The Philippines is acquiring its own air defense system from Israel.
When you always exercise, you're able to really feel how things are happen so that when the real war erupts, then we can be able to execute these plans effectively.
In just about 2 weeks, both U.S. and Philippine forces showcased a dizzying litany of joint drills. From the live-fire exercises that featured the High Mobility Artillery Rocket Systems, or HMARS of the U.S., to close quarters battle, as well as urban firefighting capabilities. Filipino and U.S. troops train each other in patrol tactics, to the use of unmanned aircraft system for surveillance and intel gathering. The American forces also training on critical operations such as refueling aircraft and helicopters, be it by air or on land, by using Philippine facilities as a way station for logistics. All these come days after the Defense Department confirming to CNN Philippines China spied on a joint Philippine and U.S. exercise held earlier this year. Manila filed a diplomatic protest against the incursion of a Chinese Navy ship detected off Palawan in late January.
So ang ginawa nitong barko na to ay meron kasi tayong kanyang exercise na nangyayari with the US Force, US Navy. Ay minamanmanan niya.
But for Balikatan, which ended on Friday,
there have been no monitored activities whatsoever.
Both forces calling the joint exercises a success in further strengthening the bond that binds them together before and the years to come. David Santos, CNN Philippines.
Still to come after the break, games 2 for both the PBA and PBL finals are underway. We'll tell you which teams are ahead so far. Plus, Las Vegas turns purple for the much-awaited BTS shows kicking off tomorrow. Stay tuned to CNN Philippines. Welcome back to CNN Philippines in sports. It is another night of finals matchups with the Meralco Bolts currently shooting for their second straight win against Barangay Ginebra in the PBA Governors Cup at the Mall of Asia Arena. So far, Meralco maintains the lead at the first quarter, 23-20. Heading over now to the Premier Volleyball League, the second finals match at the Inares Center in Antipolo is in favor of Petrogas in the first set with a score of 8-6. But Creamline already has reason for celebration, with Tots Carlos just awarded Most Valuable Player and Best Opposite Spiker of the conference. Go to our social media platforms for the game results later. And just in time for Filipino Food Month, a Philippine cuisine restaurant in the U.S. state of Chicago has earned a Michelin star. Kasama serves local favorites like adobo and pancit bihon with a twist. It's owned by husband and wife Filipino Tim Flores and Korean-American Jeannie Kwan. The Michelin star is considered one of the highest honors in the culinary industry. And music updates now. BTS paints Las Vegas purple to create Borahegas. Multiple buildings and figures lit up in the K-pop group's signature color in anticipation of their permission to dance on stage shows in Allegiant Stadium. The concerts are slated for April 8, 9, 15, and 16. Every member will perform, but BTS's agency announced that Jin's movements will be minimized because he's recovering from finger surgery. The vocalist also sat out choreography for most of the group's Grammy Awards performance on Monday. And legendary progressive rock group Pink Floyd releases new music after 28 years in support of Ukraine. All proceeds of Hey Hey Rise Up go to humanitarian relief for the country. The music video was released today. The song features vocals from Ukrainian musician Andriy Klivnyuk's viral video singing to protest the Russian invasion. And that is it for tonight. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Honteveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
Our muscles are conditioned and developed through various movements and nutrition, but our bodies will age and our muscles won't respond to certain movements when we get older. Our muscular system, with the support of our nervous system, is responsible for how we move and live out our lives. And developing these muscles as you age is part of preventing any bodily deterioration. Today in the program, we'll discuss how muscles work, grow, and what kind of movement exercises can people of all ages do at home. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Our guests are here today to give insights on how the biology of muscles change as we age. With us is Dr. Enrique Leonardo Pacion, who is an orthopedic sports surgeon at the Asian Hospital and Medical Center. Also with us is Dr. Franklin Domingo. He's a rehabilitation medicine specialist from the Center for Regenerative Medicine and the Pain Management Service of the Makati Medical Center. Studies show that older adults with mobility problems, meaning people who find it hard to move and walk, can reduce their risk of becoming disabled by about 20% if they participate in a regular program of aerobic and resistance exercises. Dr. Rich, do you agree with these findings that suggest that building muscle strength can benefit older people, not just older people, even those who are deemed frail throughout their lives?
Well, I think building muscles really beneficial for all ages, especially for the elderly. Building muscles makes you feel better, that meaning that your muscles are stronger, you get to have good control of what you're doing, like daily activities. At the same time, you can get to enjoy also doing things functionally.
Apart from this, we're trying to share knowledge on some of the misconceptions. And one of those misconceptions, predominantly cardiovascular exercise, is something that wastes muscles, or you can lose muscles through just doing pure cardio. Is there any truth to this? Could you give some clarification?
Just pumping your heart rate alone, that means your body is working. Just like, swimming, biking, just walking alone, that can actually pump your heart rate. So that means you're not really losing muscle, you're actually working on your muscle groups.
Dr. Frank, can muscle turn into fat?
I don't think it could, and I don't think it would. And what actually happens is that as we grow old gracefully, we get to accumulate more fat. We never stop growing. It's just that some of us become sedentary, and when we become sedentary, we tend to accumulate more fat. We sit more often, we are staying here in front of our computers more often, and that tends to accumulate fat, and then it tends to reduce the amount of muscles that we have because we don't use them anymore. When that happens, when insulin resistance gives way, people could have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and then which could lead on to diabetes. And when this leads on to diabetes, you become more susceptible to having heart disease, to having certain immunological problems. People who are sedentary have a very much increased risk of that. And when we exercise, we very much increase or improve our chances of not dying from anything, from an all-cause mortality.
So we fact-checked some statements about building muscles. Now let's revisit the muscular system here a little bit, because some of the functions of the muscular system include that of course, mobility, circulation or blood flow, respiration, our breathing. Dr. Rich, is it possible to have just a strong muscular system? Can one survive without the other?
Everything should work in unison. Okay, just not only building muscles. Okay, because why muscles? Okay, it helps you function better, but of course, for me, I always stress flexibility, especially for athletes or elderly patients. Once you lose your flexibility, that means your muscle won't work properly also. So it's not having the full potential. Like for example, having flexibility, normally it moves this way, right? But once you are very stiff or not, or you don't have very good flexibility, your muscle shorten. So it only moves like this. You can be very strong, but it only moves like this. So you're not using the full potential of the muscle. That way you can actually strain lots of parts, like muscle strains, muscle tears. That's the problem there.
Is it good flexibility or just adequate flexibility for that matter that people can reap the benefit?
It really depends on the activities you do. Okay, it depends also on the age. Okay, all what we need to do is actually you have to function well. Like for example, if you're an athlete, Okay, losing flexibility causes so many problems then, especially if you're also old. How can you even bend down to reach something? If not, you're going to have your low back pain now, right? Or just going up the stairs alone. If you don't have good range of motion of your hip or your knee or your ankle, you really have problems going up down the stairs.
For those of us who are non-athletes, will being flexible to a certain point benefit non-athletes as well?
I would like to add another component which might be more interesting for people who are 50 and above, and that would be stability. And that would be improving their chances of avoiding a fall. And stability for elderly individuals plays a very, very important role. And simple activities which we usually take for granted can become very, very hard to do when you're 80 and above. And that's why it's important to realize that while you're still young, while you're still at the earliest age that you are right now, that you start exercising.
Can everyone at any age enjoy the benefits of having some form of exercise?
I think almost anyone at any age can enjoy some form of exercise. It just depends on what kind of exercise, because even in the ICU, we start rehab programs for patients in the ICU, and we see that when patients exercise, even while they're in the intensive care unit, their hospital stays decrease, their quality of life improves. And if we can do this for people in the ICU, we can certainly most do it also for other people with other comorbidities.
Building muscles is more than flexing and showing off your physique. When we come back, we'll talk about the different major muscle groups and exercises that will help build muscle strength. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. Now, in this episode, we're talking about building muscle. Now, a lot of our viewers may have this notion of building muscles as something that is more of a physique and aesthetic-driven endeavor. Doc Rich, when it comes to the muscle groups that need to be worked, is it important to be as specific as, say, a competitive bodybuilder where every exercise isolates a specific muscle, or can we focus on bigger muscle groups in order to benefit the body as a whole?
The bigger you are, the better you look. But of course, for me, those people are really muscular. They lose their function. They don't function well. They don't move well. Because why? They lose their flexibility. For me, it's more of about functional movements, especially for the elderly. Right. So when you do that, the major muscle groups are the muscle groups what they need, how to do their chores, their daily activities, going up, down the stairs. So the major muscle groups here are, of course, the bigger joints, the hip, the knee, ankle, shoulders, everything. But of course, don't get me wrong, we also need the fine motor movements, which are the smaller joints for writing, holding things. So they're just, well, for me, you have to individualize also what you want to improve for every person, because it's not one size fits all.
Now, Dr. Frank, I'd like to touch on a subject which is quite alarming, especially to the younger crowd when it comes to muscle building, and that is anabolic steroid use. Is the use of steroids in order to build muscle something that could have detrimental effects later on in life when they become older in life?
It's sad to say, though, that when I have talks with nephrologists who see patients undergoing dialysis, a lot of these young people who are in dialysis, unfortunately, they've been on anabolic steroids for quite some time. And one of the side effects of anabolic steroids, well, not only is involved our renal system, but also affecting our reproductive system. So if that doesn't get you to stop, then I don't know what will. Your health in general, your immunity can also be affected. And it sets off a whole lot of other problems which will do more harm than good in the long term.
Are there some specific movements, some types of training that those who are 40 years old and above will be able to benefit on? So is there an emphasis on weight resistance here, or the type or how heavy a weight people need to exercise with in order to build those muscle groups?
40 and above, it's not more of building big muscles. It's more of actually doing things functionally. To sustain what they're doing, they have to enjoy what they're doing first also. It's either when you go swim, you go biking, you go walking, you go jogging, you can play badminton. I have patients 60-plus-year-old, 70s, they still play badminton. There's a small group that plays even basketball, 65 above. So that means they can still enjoy what they're doing, but of course you have to modify what they're doing also.
Now, Dr. Rich, a common thing that we get questions na habang daw tumatanda, lumiliit daw yung tao. So when they were younger, they were like 6 foot tall. Now that they're 70 years old, they are 5'8". Is there any truth to this? As people grow older, they shrink.
Their posture changes, especially the older people who have muscle atrophy. Of course, they're sedentary. They don't work out anymore. Most of them become, they slouch. That alone can actually cause, at the same time, the fluid of the disc in the spine lessens. So that's why it also compresses.
What can our viewers do early on so that when they reach a certain age, they could minimize or try and even prevent some of these symptoms that may appear that you will look shorter?
Just simply get out of our seats and walk. That would be very good. And if we can walk with something loaded on us and we can exercise with the load, that would be excellent because we'd be loading up the bones. I think what Dr. Pasion might have been referring to would be osteoporosis. So in patients who do not exercise too much, osteoporosis can be seen. And not only the disc height, but sometimes even the vertebra itself, the backbone. It can also diminish in height, and that could contribute to people looking a bit smaller. It might not be something we can totally avoid, but we can surely minimize it by engaging in regular physical activities.
What type of movements would be ideal, Dr. Frank? What level? Do they need to sign up in a gym, be in an active class in the gym? Is this the type of movements that they need?
20s, 30s, 40s, maybe up to even the age 50. The American College of Sports Medicine recommends at least 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous physical activity. If the patient is doing a vigorous form of physical activity, they can skip the extra 75 minutes and they can get by with just 75 minutes of vigorous exercise. But this has to be, of course, coupled with at least 2 sessions per week on 2 separate days, preferably spaced apart by at least 1 day, of weight training or resistance training. You can use resistance bands. You can use anything at home that has to lift weights.
Now, in building muscles, exercise is only a part of gaining muscle mass. Nutrition and diet play an important role here as well. More on this when we return. Your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. Now, protein is the building block of muscles. Dr. Rich, is it true that when building muscles, more protein is better?
Well, you just have to have enough protein to make your muscles function well. If you do anything in excess is bad.
Is it important to substitute this protein shake, external sources of like protein shakes, additional concentrated protein sources, the balanced diet enough to be able to meet the needs of muscle growth?
All the things we eat, especially healthy food, balanced diet, is actually good enough. Other protein we take is more of, we call it supplements. So it won't really substitute what we really have naturally.
What about carbohydrates? Are carbohydrates something our LD should be thinking about consuming at a certain level that is appropriate for their age?
Carbohydrates play an important role in glucose metabolism. And the problem is if you take too much carbohydrates, too much sugar, it goes out into the liver. And what the liver does, it transforms it into fat. So you just want to be able to take the right amount of carbohydrates so that that's necessary for you, according, of course, to your daily requirements. And too much of it just gets stored as fat. So you wouldn't want to gain weight and gain weight as fat. You'd like to gain weight as muscle.
Dr. Rich, when it comes to building muscles, this is for who are at that age in their life where they want to gain more muscle mass. Which do you think is most appropriate, the resistance in weight or the consistency of the activity?
Well, I think it's both. Because first of all, in order to, feel better, at least gain proper muscle strength, you need to have consistency. At the same time, once you have that consistency, for me, you don't really have to get big muscles, right? You just have to, sustain what you like. It's just like having like a maintenance thing. So for me, for older people, less weight, but they can actually have more reps for that.
Dr. Frank, a common injury among people of all ages, for that matter, is that of low back pain. Could you talk more about this? Is this more a factor of a lack of strength or a lack of flexibility?
I think it's a combination of a lack of strength, a lack of flexibility, and of course, what we've talked about earlier, stability. It's because stability would actually refer to you holding an object outside your body and transmitting the force of that from that object down to the ground. And you don't want it being transmitted to your back as much as possible, or to your knees or to your hips. You want to be able to execute that movement in a very fluid, in a very physiological way, so that the muscles on your back wouldn't get strained. And of course, the strength will come in when you're lifting it. You will not be able to lift a heavy object, of course, if you do not have the strength. And the flexibility, as Dr. Pasion mentioned earlier.
Could you share with us some exercises, Dr. Frank, some specific exercises that can address stability and flexibility?
For sedentary individuals, the simple act of sitting and standing up, that's something you can do. And if you like, you can carry weights and you can raise your arms as you sit and stand. You can do half squats, you can do full squats, you can do planks. So if you're more advanced, you can do sit-ups. There are many things that you can do, jumping jacks, anything at all that gets you moving. So for people who are in a cycle of being sedentary, who haven't made exercise a habit yet, we should work on with what we have.
And before we go, Doc Rich, do you have any additional tips on growing and maintaining muscle in a healthy way?
I always preach to have an active and healthy lifestyle. Okay, so something that you can, when I say active, doesn't mean you play sports. Okay, active being something you can enjoy. So at least you can sustain it, like having twice a week, exercise 30 minutes a day. Okay, so at least in that way, you get to have better function. You get to do things you like. At the same time, you feel healthy, physically and mentally.
And Dr. Frank, before we go, any advice for our viewers, especially when it comes to muscle building, flexibility, stability?
It's not the years in your life, it's actually the life in your years. And that's what actually exercise is and what it does. It's one of the most potent medications or drugs that we have for us to be able to have a good quality of life. And with a good quality of life, we can have good flexibility, good strength, and all the other things that you've mentioned earlier. So the sooner we incorporate exercise into our lives, I think the better that will be.
Older people do not gain muscle mass as well as young people, but this reality should not stop people in their 50s and older from exercising. If anything, it should push you to exercise more as you age. Thank you, orthopedic sports surgeon Dr. Enrique Leonardo Pasion and rehabilitation medicine specialist Dr. Franklin Domingo, for being with us today and sharing your tips as well as your insights. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching MedTalk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.
Radio, DZKI-IRIGA welcomes CNN Philippines to bring you the latest news you can use, news you can trust. Listen to Newsnight, weekdays, 6 p.m.
We now go above and beyond the headlines.
Followed by Med Talk, Health Talk.
We'll talk about how to keep ourselves healthy during the pandemic.
Politics as usual.
In this country, not everything really goes according to plan, and politics is, as usual,
up close and more. Catch CNN Philippines Hour on DZKI-IRIGA. Weekdays, 6 to 7 p.m.
Sa pagpili ng liderato, laging tatandaan, dapat nasa kanya lahat ng katangian na maka-Pilipinas. Taong may respeto sa buhay at pamilya, makabuluhan at matinoong pamumuhay. Siya yung makapagtataguyod ng kabutihang panlahat, di mangiiwan, makakasama ang lahat. Malinaw ang pananaw sa makabagong bukas, makatwiran at patas pakisama, at higit sa lahat, maka-Diyos siya dapat. Sa pagpili ng liderato, laging tatandaan, dapat nasa kanya lahat ng katangian, maka-Pilipinas, maka-Pilipinas.
Gabayan ng Pilipinong bumoto ng responsable. Yan naman ang aming
Panatang Maka-Pilipinas.
Iboboto ko, Maka-Pilipinas.
Makabayan sa lupang sinilangan.
Makataot may respeto sa buhay at pamilya.
Siya ay makatwiran at patas makisama.
Masigasig tumulong makaahon ang bawat isa.
Makatarungan, makalingat, maalalahanin sa kapwa.
Makakasama ang lahat, siya'y di mangiiwan.
Siya ay makapagtataguyod ng kabutihang panlahat.
Siya ay makabatas.
Siya ay makatotoo.
Siya ay may malinaw na pananaw para sa makabagong bukas.
Higit sa lahat, siya ay maka-Diyos.
Kaya't ayaw niya ng karahasan. Siya'y makakapayapaan.
Iboboto ko ang isang tao na makakalayaan.
Isang leader na makakalikasan.
Isang Pilipinong makabuluhan at matino ang pamumuhay.
Sa isip, sa salita, at sa gawa.
Gabayan ang Pilipinong bumoto ng responsable. Yan naman ang aming panata sa PPCRV.
Hindi sa'yo yan, hindi sa'yo yan.
Hindi sa'yo yan.
Maliit man o malaki, ang korupsyon ay korupsyon. Kapag hinayaan, sisirain nito ang kinabukasan ng bayan. Kaya maglakas loob sumigaw ng
Hindi sa'yo yan, hindi sa'yo yan.
Hindi sa'yo yan.
hindi sa'yo yan.
To report about corruption, please contact DOJ Action Center at dojAC@doj.gov.ph.
Bye!
Oh, ano na naman?
Ano nga ni ito sa numero kan Ako Bicol Party List?
18. 18 ang numero sa baluta kan Ako Bicol Party List.
18?
18! Yan ang hanapon mong numero sa baluta sa lindong kan mga party list.
Tatandaan ko na. Numero 18 ang Ako Bicol Party List.
Iboto ang sarili. Ako Bicol Party List. Katabang na, kasurug pa. Numero 18 sa balota. Political Press paid for by Ako Bicol Party List.
CNN Philippines Hour sa RPN-DZKI-IRIGA alas 6 hasta las 7 ng manggi, Lunes hanggang Biyernes. CNN Philippines Hour.